You're listening to Compliance Bites with VetSnap, hosted by resident compliance pros Courtney and Cass, where we cover bite-sized DEA compliance topics perfect for your snack break. Let's take a bite out of compliance and check out today's episode. And welcome everybody to today's episode of Compliance Bites with VetSnap. I'm Courtney and I'm joined here by Cass. Cass, how you doing today?
I'm good. How are you doing?
Doing all right. Today's episode is going to be covering the CFR. So let's get started with our first step. Cass, let's start out, and why don't you tell me what even is the CFR? What does that stand for? Let's start there.
Yeah, so CFR is just the shortened way of saying the Code of Federal Regulations. And it's basically all of the federal laws that you have to know and follow when it comes to anything controlled substance related. All right, I got a question for you, Courtney.
Yes.
Where did CFR even come from? Where did it start? What's the backstory on that?
So CFR has a pretty rich history, and I love kind of answering this question. It actually started back in 1938, was when the original print version was published. It is a huge kind of database or library of all of the regulations of our nation. So there's a total of 50 different titles, ranging from anything of like agriculture to controlled drug regulations.
Wow.
We can have, anything kind of going across every single regulation you could think for the country. But specifically, of course, we're going to be covering our controlled substance regulations today. And the fun thing is that we went from a print version of the Code of Federal Regulations back in 1938 to actually getting a digital version in 2001. So that's made a huge difference in people being able to access and kind of look through the different regulations that they're needing to uphold in veterinary medicine. It's made it so much easier to understand what we're supposed to be doing.
Wow, that's incredible. I could tell you a lot about the specifics about controlled substance one, but I didn't even think about the fact that there's the whole entire nation and everything that we should probably be following as far as there's different probably sections and like you said, titles.
Can definitely be overwhelming. There's so much different knowledge. So with all of those 50 different titles though, Cass, why don't you talk a little bit more? What's the title that we specifically need to be focusing on when it comes to controlled substances?
Yes. So the one that is where my knowledge is at, and the one that we need to pay attention to in vet medicine is Title 21, Chapter 2. So that's actually the Food and Drug Administration, where the Department of Justice is coming in and they're saying, here's what you have to follow as far as pertaining to food and drug, which controlled substance falls under that drug category.
What kind of happens if, let's say, a clinic just says, this is a little bit confusing. It's a lot of things to go through. What happens if someone just ignores the CFR? Is that allowed?
Big no. They will find you eventually. Yes, the CFR is pertaining to everybody in this section, right? So it's not just vet medicine, but it is becoming more knowledgeable that, there's controlled substance use heavily in animal medicine. And so they are starting to crack down and look at vet clinics a little bit closer. But
Cass, can you talk a little bit more about what is the reason? What is that why of why people should be caring about the Code of Federal Regulations?
Yes, I love, this is my favorite question. And whenever I'm talking to anybody and I get asked, why do I care? Why should it matter? And really at the end of the day, you want to go back and you want to think about why do you use controlled substances in the first place, right? And that's for our patients. I think about like all the big surgeries that we do. And what if I couldn't pre-med my patients with the controlled substances that I have? What if they didn't have the pain control because I didn't have those opioids available to give them? And so when I think about my why, it goes back to my patients. I truly don't feel that we can do quality medicine and the best for our patients without them.
Now, Cass, to finish off, I just kind of want to ask one question. Was there ever a time that understanding the CFR saved your clinic from a misstep?
Yes. So when it came to record keeping, it was huge for us to make sure that we had the client's address on every log entry. We didn't have that before, especially when we were paper. And when it came to like, is that really required? Do we even really need to have it? We were kind of tossing it up. And I was able to go through the CFR and find that is absolutely required. And so right there, every one of our log entries moving forward were now completely accurate with all the required information. Versus before, every one of those was not compliant. They technically could have been an infraction on every single one of those. It could have cost us tens of hundreds of thousands of dollars if they really wanted to. So yes, CFR can definitely help help in areas where you're like, oh, I didn't even realize I was not being compliant.
Yes. And I guess let's just finish with, let's talk a little bit more. You said tens of hundreds of thousands. What is the penalty if we are not being compliant with any of those regulations with the CFR? What is it? A couple $100? Like what are we actually looking like there when it comes to money?
No, the last that I've seen it, it's upwards of about $18,000 per infraction. So if you think about that in terms of like, you know, you have people like, well, it's not a big deal. You know, I don't have the client address, but I have the patient name and I have the client last name and I have the amount that I used. For every single log entry, that could be an infraction against you. And that is going to add up. I mean, think about it, how many log entries you do in a month's time. If they were to get you on every single one of those, I mean, that's huge, especially for private owned practices. I mean, any practice, but especially like I'm from a very rural area where private owned, that would shut us down. I mean, that having to pay fines like that, that's more money than we would be able to come up with in the time frame that we have to pay it. So definitely can get scary with the fines.
I'm sorry. I feel like sometimes, people are like, oh, it's just going to be a little slap on the wrist, like $100 fine, like it'll be fine. I don't have to worry about it. But it is huge. I know you mentioned, private owned practices, but my friends, even if you were corporate, it does not.
It adds up fast.
It adds up fast, and it goes after you as the DEA registrant. It's not going to be that they are just finding, they'll send a bill to, your corporate.
They're going to send it up the chain.
It is still you as that individual DEA registrant that is on the hook for that if they come into your practice and you are not following the CFR. So definitely want to make sure that we are diving in, that again, we are making sure that we are staying up to date with our CFR regulations, because it can come back and it can bite us. It can bite us pretty hard for sure. So Cass, let's move into our next topic and let's dive into the electronic CFR. So we said we got that digital version in 2001. That was amazing. But let's just dive a little bit more into it. So can you tell me what is the eCFR for someone that maybe has never gone to it before? What is it like?
Yes. So it's a lot at first. I'm not going to lie. It's a lot at first. But when you get in there and you start playing around and you click and you get familiar with it, it is an amazing, I'll call it book of knowledge, but a digital book of knowledge of everything that's required of you. And so it's broke down by different sections and subsections. So they try to organize it in a way that's like, here's where you would go to find who's required to register. Then you could drop down and it talks about manufacturers versus distributors versus dispensers versus practitioners. So little nuances like that, definitely people need to pay attention to. But as far as navigating through it, they really do try to organize it in a way that if you're like, okay, I need to know about the record keeping, or I want to find out about disposal things, there's different subsections that you can actually go to specific to that exact type of question, which is great.
Perfect. Let's go ahead and dive in and kind of take a look at see what everything looks like. Okay, Cass, can you talk me through the eCFR? Let's kind of navigate through here together.
Yes. So when the page that you're looking at right now is all of it. It's all those 50 titles that you talked about, but we're looking specifically for Title 21. That's going to be the one that is the food and drug that we care about when we're talking about controlled substances. So when you break that open, you'll see that there's a lot of different subchapters, things like that. So within Title 21, we care about Chapter 2. So that's that Drug Enforcement Administration, the Department of Justice. Those are the people putting in the laws pertaining to the controlled substances. That's what we want to pay attention to. So then when you click into that, then it opens up even bigger, right? It becomes super confusing. And you're like, there's a lot here. There's a lot to unpack. But they really do try to organize it. So you're in Title 21, you're in Chapter 2, and now you see that there's part, and it starts at 1300. And then if you were to scroll down, it goes all the way to 1321. So each one of these has little subsections below it as well. So, for example, if you pop down the definitions, you can actually see definitions that relate to controlled substances. You can see definitions in relating to the dispensing of controlled substances. You can go further and look at registration stuff. It talks about record keeping. It talks about labeling, what even you have to have on a label on a controlled substance that you're dispensing out of your hospital. All of that stuff, inventory requirements, you're going to find all of that here. So what I always recommend to people is come in here and just start clicking through. I mean, really come in, play around with it, get familiar with it, keeping in mind that this is like what I call the bird's eye view or the big umbrella of all of the laws that pertain to anything controlled substance. So it's not just us as the dispensers or practitioners. You're going to see laws in here that matter for manufacturers, reverse distributors, the regular distribution companies, things like that. So make sure when you're reading through these that you're taking and doing what applies to us as the practitioners.
And I feel like this can see people come in, and even though we've narrowed it from, 50 different titles, we've said, okay, you need to go to Title 21. We've said there's a specific chapter that we need to look at. I feel like this can still always feel very overwhelming to people. They see this and they're like, oh my goodness, this is so much different information, not just the parts, but then I get into subsections. It's a little bit too much. So I feel like my favorite thing is always just going in and using the eCFR's search term. This is going to be kind of that best resource. And even though you may not be able to come in and say, you know what, I know I need to go to part 1301 subsection 0.02. Like you may not know the exact, but getting it closer and closer to it, it's going to give you the more specific results. So even if, let's just pop back to, I'm back to my main page. Let's say I look up security here. I need to know how I need to store my controlled substances. I now have over 10,000 matches right here. If I'm just looking at it in the main page, we don't got time for that. No one has time for that to be able to go through. But if I then come in, I go back to Title 21, I come down to Chapter 2, and I come in, and even just within here, and let's do it again. I'm looking up security. Boom, now I have 35. That is doable. I can do that a little bit easier here.
Absolutely.
And from there, even coming in, I know that part 1301 is going to be talking about my security. So if I just come in here and I type security in again, it's going to, again, give me an even more narrow answer. So and now I'm down to 7. Using that search, I mean, just getting as close as you can, it makes it less overwhelming for people, I feel like.
Yeah, that is such a good use of that search bar. Definitely.
Now, Cass, what are some other tricks of the trade that you recommend when people are coming into the eCFR? What are some of your best suggestions that have just made life easier for you?
Don't get swallowed whole is what I always told myself when I would come into this. I would tell myself to take a deep breath and remember what my main question was, because you'll find yourself, even if you're searching, you'll find yourself down a rabbit hole a little bit, and you're reading things that weren't even your original question or original thing you wanted to look up. So just remembering what your focus was when you came into here, write it down, have it with you, so you know, okay, I'm looking for security only. Another thing that I really like to do is there's actually a little mailbox or a envelope looking thing on the left there where you can subscribe to this specific chapter of the CFR. That's huge. That is what will actually alert you when there's been changes. So that's another thing that's 100% our responsibility, is knowing when there's been changes to this and making sure that we're still being compliant and following the laws. So by hitting subscribe, you'll actually you put in an email, you'll get emailed when there's been modifications, changes, things added, things like that. That way you stay up to date without having to come back in here and wonder what was different from the last time you looked at it.
So now that we have kind of all of these different parts, so again, Chapter 2 is going to give us parts 1300 all the way to 1321. Cass, let's pick out what are going to be those heavy hitters, those specific parts where vets are always going to be asking questions, the parts that are most prominent of the regulations that they need to know. What are going to be those main parts that they should be looking into right here?
Yes, that's a great question. So main ones is going to be your records and your record keeping requirements. That's a huge one. So that's going to be 1304, part 1304. That would be one that I come in and I get familiar with. inventory requirements, which is part of the records and record keeping. You can kind of come in and get familiar with that. Another one is the security. So come in and know how you're supposed to store and handle your controlled substances, getting familiar with that part. And then the next one that I get asked a lot is methods of destruction. How can I destroy controlled substances? What do I do with them when I'm all done with them, or they're expired, or what? So making sure that you're coming in and getting familiar with that. Those are the main ones that come to mind for me. I mean, there's definitely more, and we should know this stuff kind of in total. But when it comes to kind of the common questions I get and the headache that I would run into repeatedly, it was always what's required of me that I have to do for inventory, record keeping, and log creation. How am I supposed to store and handle these? And what do I do when I'm done with them? Those were like the main questions that I would always get.
Yeah. I think of that, I would add two others are really the only two ones that would pop to me. So we've got 13, we've kind of gone into, again, 1304 for, again, all of our records. We've copped into 1301 for, again, those security requirements, and then 1317 for disposal. I would say if anyone is carrying Schedule 2 controlled substances, definitely make sure that you're looking into Part 1305. That is going to go straight into your Schedule 2 specifically. If anyone's doing like Fatal Plus, if you are carrying any of your Schedule 2s, this is going to just talk about, again, how we're ordering everything that needs to be done with our Schedule 2 specifically. That is going to be a great section if you specifically have that. And then even just popping back to 1301 again, I would say make sure that y'all are looking in to your registration specific requirements.
Yeah.
This is where I feel like we get so many questions of, okay, I have 2 businesses. Do I need multiple DEA registrations?
Yes.
Or, I'm moving and when do I need to renew things? How often am I supposed to renew? I feel like we get a lot of confusion around registration specifically. So 1301 will be a double hitter basically for you. Absolutely. It does your security and storage, but it's also going to answer all of those registration questions. 1304, again, it's going to do all of that inventory and continuing records. 1305 is going to be helping you out with your Schedule 2s, and 1317 does your disposal. Those are really going to be, those heavy hitters. If you need to push it down to just say, okay, I only have time to look at a couple, those are going to be the ones I'd recommend so heavily.
Yep. And something that people don't even think about is ensuring that you know what subsection or what part applies to you if you are a traveling vet, or if you are you have like a business, but you do farm calls and you want to have, your drugs on hand. So that 1301 is definitely a section I would look into for that.
Definitely. Yes. So overall, those are going to be our heavy hitters. Those are going to be those main sections that, yes, you should, as a DEA registrant or as someone who is handling controlled substances, yes, you should be familiar with all of the different parts. You should take the time to go through and kind of look through each one of these. But if you want to do I have 20 million questions that I need to know about controlled substances. What's going to answer the majority of them? Those are going to be your main parts to really help you out there.
Yep.
All right, Cass, let's move on to kind of learning how to use the CFR like a pro and how to figure out what are these resources. So what would be, just across the board, your number one piece of advice for someone that is just starting to explore the CFR? Someone that's just starting to learn. Maybe we are either a new DVM. We just got out of school. We're just opening a business. I don't really know exactly what I'm supposed to do. Or maybe, again, I'm just realizing, hey, there are things that I'm supposed to be doing and I haven't been doing them before and I'm needing to learn more. What resources should they be turning to? What advice would you give new people?
Oh, I want to just take them under my wing and say, I was you once. I was you. I was new. I was put in charge of something that I had no idea about. And there is help. That's the biggest thing, is like, you're not alone, and there is help. So attending things like this is huge, where you get little snippets and little pieces of information, resources that allow you to go outside of here and dig deeper. But any webinars that you can find, any articles that you can read, things like that are great references and resources to kind of gain that knowledge that you might be lacking, or that confidence in the things that you're already doing right, or where you're starting out. But when it comes to the CFR, is just kind of started with those main sections. Start with maybe one section at a time and really learn it bullet point it so that you understand it, and don't like try to read through the whole thing and retain it all in one sitting. I don't think any of us could probably do that. I've been using it for years and years, and there's still times I'm like, wait, what section is that in? So utilizing, like you showed us with that search bar, and just remembering that, this is a marathon. This is not a sprint. We're going to be doing this for the long haul. And there's all sorts of resources out there. I mean, VetSnap has tons of educational stuff that they put on, and it's huge and it's very, really helpful. So that's where I would tell people to start, is start somewhere, whether it be a webinar or anything like that, but don't overwhelm yourself in trying to go and read that whole thing and then apply it tomorrow as soon as you get back into your practice. Baby steps, and make sure that you're understanding.
Definitely. And that's where I feel like people can definitely get overwhelmed, that the CFR is very much in like a legalese kind of lingo, that it can be very difficult to understand. And so they may start with, again, part 1301, we're just looking into registration, and they're like, I'm already overwhelmed. I already just don't even want to do it. Nope. Someone else can deal with that. And they walk away from it. So I think webinars are going to be some of the greatest things, because again, we are going to be able to connect you with different compliance experts, and they can interpret all of that legalese to be able to say, okay, hey, here's what we should be doing. Here's how you can utilize it in practice. This is what it looks like in real life. Taking it from, again, just paper, words on in a document, to actually real life action within your veterinary practice. It makes so much of a difference. And Cass, you're one of our amazing webinar speakers, isn't that right?
I am. Yeah. I didn't want to go down that road too far, but I am. And it's one of those things that I started somewhere where I didn't have a lot of knowledge of it. And I firmly believe that we do the best that we can until we know better. And when you know better, you do better. And once you know better and you're doing better, you help others to do the same thing. And so that's kind of where I'm at. And I'm so thankful that I found VetSnap and that I get to help other people learn and just get comfortable with this stuff. It doesn't have to be as scary as it is. Just always go back to the why, right? Remember the why, and just know that we're making a difference every single day with what we're doing in medicine and getting to help these patients. And we can't do that if we don't have the controlled substances. So it is important.
Definitely. And that's where, everyone, if you are wanting to learn more, again, if that CFR is looking a little bit scary, looking a little bit overwhelming, you can always head over to vetsnap.com and look under that useful resources tab, see our free educational webinars, and sign up and just hop onto a virtual webinar where you are able to connect with different compliance experts. And again, they are able to handle that translation for you. And like I said, Cass is one of our amazing presenters. So she's able to show you, okay, hey, this is how we can translate it. This is how it looks in our actual practice. Let me take your hand. Let me make this easier for you. Let me walk you through this process to being a more compliant practice.
Yep. And I love those webinars because it's all of us that are in it, right? So I still work obviously in practice, and we all get to just kind of come together and get our own questions answered and hear a different viewpoint. And I think it's just really cool to have that community in a space that's safe for you to ask those questions that you wouldn't feel comfortable asking elsewhere. So that's what I think makes those webinars really unique. And people usually come out really happy with really good information.
Definitely. And there is also, so we do also have different compliance communities. So if y'all are also looking for other safe spaces that you are able to ask questions, say, hey, I don't know exactly what I'm supposed to do for disposal. Can someone just make it a little bit easier for me to understand how I should be disposing of my controlled substances? If you're wanting your own nice, safe space compliance community, you can always also join our Facebook group. So Veterinary Controlled Substance Compliance Network can join in. We have an amazing, amazing community there. People are able to ask questions and say, hey, what are y'all doing at your practice? What kind of protocols do you have in place? What reverse distributors are you utilizing? Who has access to controlled substances? Is it just your techs, just the DVM? How are you setting it up within your practice? So if you want to have that safe space, because again, not many people are wanting to go to the DEA specifically to ask them these questions. They're a little bit scared of ever kind of getting any kind of, light on them in terms of that, like a searchlight of being like, I don't know exactly how to answer this question, and have the DEA look at them. So if you want a safe space, head on over to our Facebook group. We would love to welcome you in. We would love to be able to answer your questions and join our community. Well, thank you, Cass, for sitting and talking with me today. I think that is all the time we have.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for having me, Courtney. I really appreciate it and enjoy doing it.
Of course. And thank you, everybody, for joining us for today's episode of Compliance Bites with VetSnap, where we got to dive a little bit deeper into that CFR and read the regs like a pro. Make sure to check us out and follow us again to come back for our next episode in the future. Have a good one, everyone. Bye. Thanks for tuning in to Compliance Bites with VetSnap. Still hungry for help? Head on over to vetsnap.com for everything you need to stay compliant with no crumbs left behind.